going on, everyone, and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be going over Joker placement. So I've had tons of comments asking, why do you place your Jokers that way? How do we know how to place our Jokers? And today we're going to go over 3 examples. One of them is going to be a very basic example of additive and multiplicative mult Jokers, and another one is going to be a little bit more in depth when you're talking about Jokers that affect playing cards and all that good stuff. And the third one is going to be an example of a high scoring run where we're looking at blueprint and brainstorm and how to calculate the perfect amount of copying, retriggering, and multiplicative mult. So let's jump into this one. So I have an example here from stream that really isn't too complicated, and I think it will allow us to kind of explain the thought process very basically. So up here we have Burglar, which adds 3 hands and removes all your discards. We have Supernova, which adds mult for every time you have played that specific hand. Green Joker, which adds 1 mult for every time you play a hand and -1 for every discard. Stuntman reduces hand size by 2 and adds 300 chips, and then Robin times your mult by 2, and that is very important, and it loses its multiplicative mult every time you discard, but we're not discarding with this run because we're playing a high card run. So why have the Jokers set up this way? Well, the way the math is scored in Balatro is from left to right. It does not use the normal mathematical equation of PEMDAS, and so that is very important to note. And while your chips and your mult times by each other, very much think of these as 2 separate things when playing the game, because it can start getting complicated if you're thinking about multiplying mult and then that mult gets multiplied by chips and all this stuff. Just think of it as, okay, I want to maximize my mult. We're going to think about that because chips are pretty straightforward and they're always additional. In the current state of the game, there's nothing that divides or times as chips, so it's always going to be additive, and the chips really don't matter in which way you play it. It's all about how do we affect this red box, this mult. And let me explain. So this Burglar is holographic. Holographic cards add 10 mult, so this is adding 10 mult. Supernova is going to be adding a bunch of mult from the fact that we've played high card a ton, or pair, I can't remember in this build. Green Joker has a bunch of additive mult, and because we haven't been discarding, we've just been playing hands. Stuntman's adding the chips, so its placement really doesn't matter, as we said. And then Ramen times the mult, multiplies the mult. I know the comment section gets mad at me for using the word times. I don't know why I do it. So let's play a clip really quick of me just playing this pair. So we're going on 4 times speed, so it's a little fast, but you'll see that plus 10 mult. This one's plusing 16 mult. Green Joker plus 12 mult, and this times by 2 or multiplied by 2. That is giving us the highest possible outcome. Now, why is that? Well, let's jump over to a quick little Google Doc so I can explain this to you. So this is what is happening to our mult on screen. We have 5 base mult from the pair. We're getting additive of 10 from the holographic, plus 12 from Supernova, plus 16 from Green Joker, and then we're timesing by 2 with the Ramen, which equals 86. This is the highest possible way, because if you add up all your additive mult and then times it by your multiplicative mult, you are going to reach the biggest number. You want the 2 biggest numbers multiplying by each other. However, let's think about it if we rearranged our Jokers in another way. What if we put Ramen first, then the holographic, then the Supernova, and then Green Joker? Well, the way Balatro would calculate this score, again, because it doesn't use PEMDAS, it just reads it left to right. I use parentheses here to make it a little bit easier to see, would be the 5 base mult, timesing by 2, which is now 10, 20, 32, 48, and you can see there's a difference of 40 mult. And you have to remember, this is just one of the boxes of the 2. You have your chips and your mult. So if we have, let's say, 10 chips, this is 860, this is 480. That is a massive difference in your total points. Now you scale that to 100 chips, you're talking about over 4,000 different. If you have 500 chips, it becomes a bigger and bigger and bigger deal when you're talking about bigger and bigger scores, more and more chips, more and more mult. So it's very important that you play your jokers in the correct manner. Going back to the game, you can see that every time I play, outside of maybe the first couple times I ever played the game, I'm always going to have my additive mult. This includes playing cards, but we're going to stick to talking about jokers right now. We're always going to have our additive mult first, and then our multiplicative mult last. So now let's move on to a little bit more complex of an example. The jokers here is baseball card joker, which is timesing every single uncommon joker by 1.5, and each one of these jokers is uncommon. So when these jokers are played, they will get an additional times 1.5 of our mult. And does not matter where baseball card is, it will trigger when that card is played. So you can kind of put baseball card, whatever. Onyx, which for every club card we have, adds 8 mult. And because this card is triggering when the cards are played, it also does not matter where we put this. We could put this anywhere here, and it's going to trigger +8, +8, +8 when the cards are scored. So this happens before we even reach our jokers, and actually also happens before any steals go off, because the cadence in which Balatro currently works is your playing cards are scored, and any mult that is happening to them happens, or chips or whatnot. Then it moves to your playing cards like steals, and then it moves to your jokers. So next we have Castle, which just is an additive chip joker. As we said, does not matter its placement. Now the two big ones that matter here, Midas Mask. This is going to turn every single face card into gold, and Vampire, which takes the enhancements off cards and turns it into multiplicative mult. So why do we have it set up like this? Well, like we said, these three don't really matter. This is a chip joker. We can place it wherever. This is an additive mult joker that happens when cards are played, so it does not matter. And the baseball card joker is going to times all these by 1.5 when each joker is scored, so that is also not going to matter. The only thing that matters here is that we have Midas Mask before Vampire. Now, why is this? Is because when each card is scored, it is still played left to right. So Midas Mask is going to turn these cards into gold, and then Vampire will take the enhancements off them. If we had it reversed, Vampire would be trying to take the enhancements off, there wouldn't be any, and then they would turn to gold. But when we play it this way, every single turn, we turn them into gold and we immediately take it off. And we can watch this quick hand and you can see this demonstrated. So you see that Midas Mask turned them into gold. We then see that Vampire took off the gold and increased its mult. Now we're going to see Onyx do its thing. It's going to plus mult for those cards played. Then baseball cards doing its thing. It's timesing these by 1.5 when they're played. Castle adds its chips, and we end up with a massive score of 240,000. So again, it's not just about additive and multiplicative mult. There's also situations that you have to be aware that these jokers are always played left to right. You have to know the system in which things are scored. Again, playing cards are scored first, then your hand, then jokers. It's also important to note that stuff like Midas Mask and Vampire work before the scoring even happens. So as you saw, this Midas Mask added the gold, and the Vampire took it off before the scoring cards were even played, but they still moved left to right. Midas Mask added it, and then Vampire took it off. I think I may have one more hand here that we can just look at if you're still, a little confused. Here, I play these two. Midas Mask adds it. Vampire takes it off. Now these are going to score. Onyx is going to kick in when these score. If we had any steals, those would then hit. Then it would move to these jokers. This is timesing by 1.5. This adds its chips, times this by 1.5, times this by 1.5, and then Vampire times this by 13.8 and the 1.5 from the baseball card joker. So lastly, let's talk about super high scoring hands, which normally involves multiplicative mult happening multiple times due to retriggers. What we have in this hand is Baron, which times each king in hand by 1.5, basically adding a steal trigger to every king. Plus these kings are also steal. We have Mime, which retriggers your cards in hand one time. And we have a Brainstorm that could copy either Mime or Baron. This is a negative red card. It doesn't matter for this use case. It's like +3 mult. You'll see it won't matter. Kano is timesing our mult by a good amount. I think it's like times 12, and then this by times 7. But again, for the purpose of this lesson, ignore these three jokers. The whole focus of this is timesing by 1.5 in the hand and how many times that is triggered and how to maximize your score with both of these. So the way to maximize your score is to get the most amount of timesing by 1.5s per king as possible. So let's break down the anatomy of what's happening to each king with my current Joker setup. So without a red seal, which is a retrigger, this king is timesing by 1.5 due to the fact that it's steel, timesing 1.5 with Baron, and then Brainstorm is copying the leftmost Joker, and it's copying the timesing by 1.5. So this times is by 1.5 each time it's triggered 3 times. Mime will retrigger it once, and it triggers once by itself, so it's getting triggered twice. So we're timesing by 1.5 3 times twice. So that means this king is going to go off 5 times, or it's going to times by 1.5 5 times. It's going to happen for all these kings. Now the reason we're copying Baron over Mime is especially important for these red seals. So because these are red seals, what's happening to this king is the same exact thing, except it's being retriggered one more time, which means it's timesing by 1.5 due to the steel, due to the Baron, due to the Brainstorm, and then it's triggering once on its base, once on the red seal, and once with Mime, which means we're timesing by 1.5 3 times, and then that is triggering 3 times, which means we have a total of 9 times we are timesing by 1.5. Well, why don't you Brainstorm Mime instead of Baron? Well, for these steel kings, it would not matter because what would happen is if we had Mime over here, this would times by 1.5 with the steel, the Baron would times by 1.5, and then it would trigger once, twice, 3 times. That's the same exact math. It's doing it 6 times regardless. I may have said 5 prior in my statement. The math is 6. And then we move over to the red seal kings. So if we were copying Mime instead, we would be timesing by 1.5 once, twice, and then triggering 4 times. That is a total of 8. So we lose an entire timesing by 1.5 for every red seal if we copy Mime instead of Baron. Let's go to a Google Doc and I can more clearly show you, but quickly we'll replay this hand. It's from the second round of the tournament. The red seals, because it's exponentially better on those. Rudely being interrupted by my own self. So we can really quickly rewind that. And you'll see this times is by 1.5, times is by 1.5, times is by 1.5, and then we do it again. So it's going to trigger twice. We have a total of 6 timesing by 1.5 on those. And then when we move to the red seal, this is where things really start to heat up because we times by 1.5, times by 1.5, times by 1.5. We do it again because of the red seal, and then we do it again because of Mime, which means we get it 9 times. And we end up with this massive score of, I believe, 4.6 e to the 18 zeros at the end of this score. So obviously a massive one. So like I said, let's move over to the Google Doc and actually get into the nitty gritty of the math. So this is the math happening. X equals the amount of times we are timesing this by 1.5. So this is what steel does. This is what Baron does. Y equals the times it's re-triggered. So this is each card triggers once in hand. We also have red seals that can re-trigger. We have Mime that can re-trigger. And then remember, we can move Brainstorm or Blueprint around to copy either Baron or Mime to kind of control how many times each one of these happens. Z is the total amount of times we get a times 1.5 for each king. So X times Y equals the amount of times we get a times by 1.5. If each king gets, 10 times 1.5s and 10 times it's triggered, you get 100 1.5s. So what is happening when we copy Baron in this situation is those kings with the red seal get 3 times 1.5s 3 times, which means we have a total of 9 times 1.5s per red seal king. If we were to copy Mime instead of Baron, we would have 4 re-triggers timesing by 1.5 twice, which means we would only have 8 timesing by 1.5s. So obviously you rather times by 1.5 9 times or over 8 times, because what this math is actually doing is 1.5 to the 9th, and that is how many times you are multing your mult in each of these. So this is the little bit more complex math going on here, but once you get into these numbers, this is why the final score skyrockets and we get into the billions and the E's and the trillions, quadrillions, and way higher, is because we start talking about exponents. And that is what's happening with all of these retriggers and timesing by 1.5 is you're having exponential multiplication going on per king. So I really hope this video was helpful. I would actually really love your feedback on this video. If you enjoyed it, you enjoyed this kind of really breaking down Balatro, and we could actually get into the mathematics, the true mechanics behind everything you're doing in the game. And then B, was this clear enough? I've always had trouble, explaining concepts, and that's a big part of what I'm trying to do on this YouTube channel. I feel like I've gotten better at it, but when it gets to this very technical stuff, I feel like sometimes I struggle on how to display that information. So I would love your feedback on how you think I could better do that. If you thought this was good enough, if you have any ideas, comments, suggestions, leave them down below. I would love to have that interaction with you. Hit the like button if you got anything out of this video, if you just enjoyed my content. Dislike if you didn't. Hit subscribe if you've been enjoying all of my content and you want to be notified when it goes up. My name's ZainoTV. I'm on Twitch. I'm on YouTube. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you for the next one very soon.